it's so easy to acknowledge other people, but I think we really quickly forget how important it is to acknowledge our own too. And I learned that the hard way, and that's the message I try and push to other people is naturally as human beings we sort of take on the load of other people and are able to like assess how other people feel, but aren't maybe aware enough of our own feelings and how like we feel.
Hello and welcome to the Thrive Against Cancer podcast, where we give a voice to the cancer community. My name is Toby Freeman, founder and CEO of the Robin Cancer Trust, cancer advocate and your host. Every episode we will be hosting open and honest conversations with people affected by cancer, whether personally, as a family member, clinician, or charities and organisations. We will be talking to the cancer community about the cancer community and all the things that are important to you. Our guest today was diagnosed with stage 3 advanced melanoma at 21, and he started documenting his life with cancer online during lockdown. He's now a full-time content creator sharing his life beyond cancer. Our guest today is Jak Howell.
Hi.
Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for travelling all this way, although we did say the trains weren't too bad, but
all good.
So good to have you in studio.
So good to be here.
I'm just so excited to have this chat, learn and share everything about you, and really just give you a platform to talk, because I know you've got a lot to say. So feel free to begin at the beginning. Take us all the way back.
All the way back. Okay, so it's May of 2021. We've just sort of come out of lockdown, still in, things are still in place. I noticed something on my back, my lower back. Obviously, I can't see my back. So it's more itchy than painful, but it's there. I can sense it's there. So then it starts bleeding. So that was a sort of eureka moment for me, and I thought, okay, maybe I need to take this a bit more serious. So I asked my mum if she could have a look at it, and as soon as I turned around and seen her face, I was like, oh no, this is it. I know this is it. So I couldn't actually go and see the doctor, but I had to take a picture and email it to my doctor.
Because we're still in lockdown.
Because we were so you couldn't have appointments, couldn't do anything. So done that, and I just completely forgot I even sent the picture. Went to work, was fine. And in the mornings in my old job, we used to have like this morning debrief sort of thing. And we were all stood in a circle and my phone rings, and we're not really supposed to have our phones on us. Luckily, I was a manager, so they kind of let me off. But it was an unknown number. I answered the phone. I just sort of walked outside, and she said, I'm not going to see you. I'm just going to send you straight to the hospital. Christ. And that just solidified everything for me. So I was like, right, okay, when can I go? So she said to me, you can go now, you can go whenever.
Oh, wow.
So I went back into work, and I was like, look, I'm going to have to go. I'm going to have to go to the hospital. So luckily, the hospital isn't that far away. I live in a small town. Drove to the hospital, had it cut out. It was the smallest, like 2 centimetre incision. Got it taken.
So like a biopsy?
Just sort of a biopsy. They just took the mole off. That was that sort of thing. Went back to work, just sort of...
Back to work.
Carried on.
What were you think at this point? Were you concerned? Were you just...
I mean, I was 21, so I think I was just blissfully unaware.
Things are happening.
Yeah, and I was sort of ignorant too. I mean, I was 21.
Who isn't?
Thought I was invincible. Yeah. I thought nothing was ever going to touch me. So went back to work, and my birthday is actually the end of May, and this was like the very, very beginning of May, and then 10 days later, I think it was the 9th of May, they rang me, and this is actually quite a funny story, but well, not funny, but now I look back, it is a little bit funny. I had an abscess in my mouth, and I was waiting for the dentist, because again, I couldn't go, I had to wait for an appointment and whatever else. Had an unknown number ring me, and I was like, yes, it's the dentist, I can have my tooth taken out. Like, I'm not going to be in pain anymore. Answered the phone. I can remember like it was yesterday. I was sat at the top of my stairs, and I answered the phone, ready to just say like, yeah, I'm ready. I'll come down now. And the doctor said, I'm really sorry to inform you, but you've got cancer. And like, I've never experienced silence, and I was home alone too.
Jesus.
So I just dropped. I didn't know what to even say, what to do. So my first initial thought was I'm just going to have to just tell my mum and my dad and my family. So I remember texting my mum and saying, you're going to have to come home. Basically, I've got cancer. So, and another really funny thing, I'd actually argued with my dad the night before. So I rang my dad and I was like, look, just squash it. You're going to have to come and see me. So that, like 15 minutes after I've had that phone call, I just remember sitting in my living room and my entire family was just around me. And I was just on another planet. I was so zoned out. And I can remember looking at everybody else crying and thinking to myself, why aren't you crying? Like, why have you got no emotion? But I think I just instantly went numb because I didn't cry at all.
Why did they phone? I know it was lockdown. Was that standard procedure then?
Yeah.
Just to phone a young
and it was literally just, it was my oncologist it turned out to be, but he rang me, he said, we've had your results back. I'm sorry to inform you have cancer. And that was sort of it. The phone call just ended and it just said, we'll be in touch with like next steps.
Oh, cool.
So
just literally leave you hanging.
Yeah. So, and then everybody was asking me like, well, what comes next? What's happening? And I was like, I really, truly have no idea what is going on. I was 21 years of age. How are you supposed to even know what the next steps are? No. So, yeah, that's how it all came about. And then everything just sort of domino effect. So I went straight on to a treatment plan, which failed. Then in the September, so that was, I started at the beginning of June. Then in the September, so 3 years ago, this month, I was rushed in for 2 major surgeries. So I had from my spine to my hip on my back removed, and then the top of my leg, so from like my groin to the sort of my hips area again, removed. So I was completely immobile. I couldn't move. I couldn't walk.
That is a significant.
Yeah. And
is that just spread? That had just spread.
So, yeah. So after I had the surgery, they were like, we're going to just remove as much as we can in hopes that like it'll sort of do something, like do anything.
Because melanoma, not to, if I get this wrong, but melanoma, when you hear it, is one of the more aggressive skin cancers as well. I mean,
so it is the most aggressive skin cancer. But I'll be so honest with you. When I first heard that, I just thought I'd be fine. It's just a mole that'll be cut out.
Because moles are small, right?
Yeah, and then that'll be sort of it. But when I woke up from that surgery and I couldn't move from my waist down, and that's when I first posted on social media. So when I first woke up, I was numb from my neck down, so I couldn't move at all.
Did they prepare you for that? Because that is terrifying.
It was so weird because I was awake for my surgery, but I was so like sedated,
right,
that I remember like sort of being awake on what was happening, but I was just not there at all. I was so out of it, and I remember sort of coming like back to my senses, and just went to move, and I was like, all right, no. Also, I was alone. I couldn't have my mum. I couldn't have any family members. I was completely alone.
Jeez.
And the weirdest thing was I was on a ward, a completely empty ward, alone.
That's sort of like something out of a movie, isn't it? Yeah.
So I was like, what's going on? And then another sort of horror story. When I woke up from my surgery, I couldn't move. I turned my head and the whole floor was covered in blood because my stitches had burst. So it was just getting worse and worse and worse. Anyway,
there's definitely a movie rights in this somewhere.
To go home, so I went home. Obviously, I had surgery on my back and the top of my leg, so the movement in my leg, having stitches, was sort of restricted. And then another phone call. They said that the scan I had after my surgery had showed that it just was aggressive and just going to keep coming back. But obviously I couldn't go into chemo because obviously I had to heal.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to heal if I was having chemo. So it was just sort of a waiting game, but my body just wasn't healing at all. So they just sort of waited until I was healed enough. And then the December I started my treatment. So I had a year of immunotherapy. And
And what does that look like, the immunotherapy?
So it's sort of like a week process. You've got to have your bloods and your scans like every other sort of treatment. I always went in on a Friday. I don't know why. It was just always used to fall on a Friday. Have your treatment from the morning till the afternoon. And then I went home in the evening. I did have the option to stay in hospital, but my house is like directly opposite the hospital. So it was just easier for me to go home. I did have it with old people though. I was the only young person on the ward.
Really?
So because my closest teenage cancer trust ward is an hour away. So they give me the option if I wanted to go up, I could, but did I want to travel an hour there, have a full day of treatment, and then have to travel an hour
all alone, I guess.
Yeah. Well, so you'd have to get in a car with somebody, mass,
Yeah,
all the way up, all the way back. Yeah, and that sort of brought us to the end of 2022. It was the week of Christmas. I just finished treatment, and again they just called me and said we'd like you to come in, and I just thought, oh, what
now?
What now? Because what they've done with me is they give me 5 rounds, give me a break, and then they've done the other 5 rounds. So I didn't have it all in one sort of blast. I had a break in between. And I just thought to myself, they're just going to have told me that this is a break and I've got to go back on. Went down to the hospital and they just said that my scans were clear and everything was fine. And that was that. But prior to this, when I come out of the surgery, I had 12 months to live. If the treatment didn't go well.
You were told that?
Yeah. 12 months. If I didn't react to the treatment, then...
And what age were you then? That would have been...
22.
22.
Yeah.
Wow. So you just got that dangling over you the whole year.
And that's the thing. Yeah. I had to go a whole year with
not knowing until it was going to be successful.
And it was sort of, obviously you had your scans every so often, but I think... I don't want to say they were hesitant to give me like a solid answer, but I think they sort of held back on sort of giving like full hope in case, obviously, because you just don't know.
That's the medical balancing act, isn't it?
You can just twist at any moment, and I think that's the game of cancer.
Yeah,
is it can just go wrong at any moment. So I think they held back that to an extent. So it just loomed over me for a year that.
I bet that was a good Christmas though, wasn't it?
Yeah, but the new year, it just crashed like I've never experienced in my life.
I bet. Was that a mental crash?
And I think I just exhausted myself. And I kind of made the mistake of when I was in it, I didn't allow myself to feel it all. So I think I just put on a brave face because if I was scared, I didn't want my mum to think I was scared, or I didn't want my dad to think maybe like he thinks that he is gonna go. And there was one time I was rushed into hospital. I had just come out of treatment and I had COVID. I didn't know I had COVID. So this was the January after I started treatment. So it was my first ever treatment. I was still recovering from my big surgeries, and then I had COVID. And I remember being taken into hospital. I shouldn't laugh, it's not really funny, but I was laying in the hospital bed. I had oxygen because I couldn't breathe. And I was laying there and I just thought to myself, how at 22 I was then, has my life come to this? And I just remember getting worse and worse and worse. And my mum texted me and she said, I'm not going to leave the hospital. I'm going to stay in the car. This was at like early hours of the morning, maybe 4 in the morning. And she slept in the car. And for the first time since I was diagnosed, I remember thinking to myself, this is it. Like, this is where I'm not leaving this hospital. I'm done.
Jeez, there's
no... And I just remember thinking to myself, like, how am I ever going to come back? I was so like just disheveled as a human.
And on your own.
Yeah,
that's the bit I keep coming back to.
It was so I had to go into A&E. So when I went into A&E, the lady said to me, "You can't be in the A&E room." Obviously, I'd just been diagnosed with cancer, just started treatment. So I was like, "But what?" Obviously, I couldn't speak for myself. My mum was allowed at the desk, and she said, "Right, we'll call you straight into a room." So I walked in, and the lady called me straight in. And she just put my obs on me straight away. She'd done bloods. She'd done everything. And I was just laying there, just a shell of a human being. There was no part of me that was alive. And I just remember thinking, I can't even reply to my mum. There's no way. And then I said to the nurse, I said, "Can you just get my mum? Because if this is how I'm going to go, I don't want to be on my own."
100%. Yeah.
So they told my mum that I wasn't very well, but they still wouldn't allow her to come in. But obviously I was fine.
Well, I mean, comparatively fine, acutely not fine.
So yeah. That was sort of that, and that was the only one time where I did feel scared, and like I was gonna.
But even in that moment, you're on your own, and it's not like you're breaking down in front of anyone. Like, you haven't got that outlet of.
And
someone.
even I say I felt scared because I did feel scared, but I think I was so weak that I wouldn't have been able to have. I think if I broke down, then it would have just sent me south. Because I was the only thing I had was a strong mind. The rest of me was in tatters. So I think my mentality towards it was, if I let this go, that's all I have left. So my body was just in fight or flight mode. It had no other option than to be that way. So I think
can't control this, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I can control that. So I just thought to myself, if I'm able to just push myself through mentally and get myself to the other side, then I can sort of let myself go mentally and let my body carry me.
Yeah.
Which now looking back is so silly, and I should never have done it that way. But
It's a really nice analogy, though.
I was just literally just trying to survive. That's all I was trying to do. Because I don't fear death, but I do fear not living enough. And I knew at 22 I hadn't lived enough. So that's what really pushed me. I knew I had more to give. I knew that I had like a life I wanted to live and things I wanted to do. So I just really pushed myself mentally to like keep going, no matter how weak my body was, how little I could do. That if I had to lay in bed for days upon days because I physically couldn't move, that was fine. Just stay strong in your head so you could get through it. And it got me through it, but I just experienced the worst burnout ever, and it obviously all sort of cleared.
That's an incredible thing to be able to focus your mind during all of that. And also, I was just sort of reflecting on what I've heard from other guests. You're so young when this is happening, but you're being strong for your parents as well, not letting yourself go through that. There's a self-preservation, but also a preservation of others. That sort of instinct still kicked in.
You just subconsciously acknowledge everyone else's feeling. I'm such an empathetic person. I've only got to see somebody, like an old person walking down the street, and my heart will just burst. Like, I'm so empathetic, and I think that's why maybe I did acknowledge other people's feelings more than sort of my own. And even now, like, I'll speak to people, and my family own hairdressers. So obviously they got clients going in and out, and I'll maybe go up the salon, I don't know, just pop in to say hello. And I'll see like clients of theirs, and they'll say, "Oh, but we seen how much it affected your mum." And then I'll say, "But you didn't see how much it affected me."
Yes.
So it's so easy to acknowledge other people, but I think we really quickly forget how important it is to acknowledge our own too. And I learned that the hard way, and that's the message I try and push to other people is naturally as human beings, we sort of take on the load of other people and sort of are able to like assess how other people feel, but aren't maybe aware enough of our own feelings and how
So
like
interesting.
we feel.
Do you think there's an element of almost self-preservation in that it's like you've just said, it's easier if I'm worrying about mum and
100%.
dad and all my
Yeah.
friends, because if I have to face my own stuff right now,
And I think as well, it's sort of a way to ignore it. It's an easy way to ignore it, because if you don't let yourself think about what you're going through and just sort of take on everybody else's responsibilities instead, then it's fine. I don't have to think about I don't know, whatever it may be that you've got going on, because somebody else has got something going on and they need you. But what about if you need you and you have things that need attending to, and like a mental headspace that like needs your own encouragement. And if you can give a wise word, take it too.
That's such good advice. Sorry, this hit me like a freight train. I was sitting there going, "Wow, this is great." It is. It's so easy to be. Well, not easy. Sorry, that's a way oversimplification. It's easier, perhaps, to be a caregiver for other people than for yourself.
100%, without a doubt. And even now at home, I spent my entire childhood with my granddad, and now he's incapable. He can't walk anymore. So I've more or less become his full-time carer. He's gone into so it's not a care home, but it's just sort of like housing for older people, which is so lovely. Him, they have like bingo. He has such a lovely little life.
But I live very close to one of those.
Naturally take on the responsibility that, and I'll say to it's my dad's dad, so I'll say to my dad, like, he doesn't need carers, I'll do it. And because I'm self-employed, I can work whenever I want, from wherever I want. I think naturally again, I've taken on that responsibility of making sure that he's okay. And sometimes I forget, like, you've had cancer. Like, you're allowed to take responsibility from someone else too. If they want to care for you, allow that.
Should we dive into? Did you allow other people to do that? Right. Okay.
Never.
Okay.
Yeah. Never, ever.
And that was that just because whatever this was, this mental fortitude that's getting you through?
As well, I didn't want people to know that it was hurting me as much as it was. I didn't. I've got, and now I tell everybody, I've got no sensation in my hands whatsoever. So I have really weak hands because of obviously all the treatment I had.
So that's neuropathy.
Yeah. So it's just there's nerves in my hands have just gone basically. But I remember the things like I would come home and it'd be the stupidest thing. I've had a drip in my hand all day. My body is just shutting down, and I'd come home with like bags and bags of like drugs, and they used to give like mouthwash because you had obviously bad ulcers, and it'd be things like I couldn't pick up the bags because my hands were so weak, but I'd make a point of getting them in the house somehow because I didn't want anybody else to know that it was affecting me in these stupid little ways. And now I'm rubbish at opening bottles because sometimes they're screwed tight. I'll just ask somebody, and even things like that, I think back and I just think, why didn't you just ask somebody to carry that in the house? Or why didn't you just say to somebody like, no, I am like hurting today, even if it was, I don't know, mentally or physically or whatever it was. I would never say that it was a problem, but it was obviously a problem. And I suppose in a way you kind of want people to acknowledge it regardless of how you feel, because selfishly you're hurting and you're the one in this position, and suddenly you've got cancer and your whole world has changed. And I think selfishly I wanted people to hurt with me, but I didn't want to tell them that. So I kind of like just shut away from the world and sort of put this barrier up where I just didn't allow anybody in or to see me in my frail sort of state. And again, sometimes my mum would walk in my room and obviously I'd just be in bed like a zombie. I had no sort of sense of anything. And I think she would come in the room sometimes and just sit on the bed and she'd just cry. And then But I couldn't cry because I was just emotionless. But then I'd look at her and I think, why are you crying? I'm the one in this position. But I never sort of understood that she just wanted me to accept what she had to offer.
Yeah.
But I never wanted to because I believed I could do it all on my own. But naturally too, I think when I had to do it all on my own, because I wasn't allowed anybody to come to appointments with me, I wasn't allowed this. Everything was over the phone or email.
There's no sharing the load, is there?
So I had to do it on my own. So naturally, I took it upon myself to just do it on my own.
Yeah.
And I think that's what made me find it harder to accept the help.
So can we dive into the burnout and then how you I guess rewired yourself into starting that acceptance and that journey of trying to understand what you've been through, I suppose, and then coming out of it as well.
Yeah, for sure. So I think I say this to everybody, but I obviously found out it was the 20th of December. So a week before Christmas. So the excitement was through the roof. But it was so funny because I found out, but I was too scared to tell anybody. I was absolutely petrified to tell anybody. I don't know why.
That's interesting.
So
have you ever tried to unpick that?
I have no idea, but I just remember them calling me and I went to the hospital and I was like, why are you going to the hospital? You've had your treatment for Christmas, like you're fine. So I was like, oh, I don't know. Maybe I just need, like, they haven't given me a tablet or I don't know, whatever it was I said. And I remember going down and I was driving back in my car and I thought, I cannot say the words. I just don't know what was wrong with me. I couldn't get it out. So the first thing I'd done was I went at my best friend's and her partner were there. And I remember sitting on her sofa and I just kept bursting out laughing because I couldn't, like,
so you still hadn't said when you walked in?
Still hadn't said. So I went out her kitchen and I called her out and I said, I need to tell you something. And she said, I know what you're going to say. So I think she, like, just burst into tears. It was like one of the greatest feelings I think I've ever felt in my life. And then that just sort of pushed me. But what I done was I got this girl on Instagram to make me cards, like a scratch card, so it scratched it off. So I'd done it with everybody. I've done everyone, all my friends, whatever else. Then it was Christmas. So obviously Christmas was like all up in the air. New Year was like the best New Year I've ever experienced in my life.
Obviously, yeah.
And then January came and I just run head first into the biggest brick wall. And it just came back on me like a ton of bricks. And for like the first time in my life, I remember laying in my bed and thinking to myself, I just don't want to do this because no part of me is able to cope with what's going on. And when I was diagnosed when I was 21, and in the sort of cancer world, you're still classed as a child.
Okay.
So until you're 24, you're still classed as a child. So you have youth support workers. So I had two. So I had one with TCT and one with Young Lives. And I remember this one day, she texted me and said, are you able to, like, go for a call or go for a coffee, whatever? And I just said, yeah, like, I need to speak to somebody. If I don't speak to somebody, I think, like, I will just drive my car into a wall. So I met her for coffee and it just all came out. And I was like, I'm not coping. This has just been like the worst experience. And I remember thinking for a moment, I'd rather still be going through treatment because I don't know what to do with my life.
Yes, because you're in survival mode, right?
Yeah, so for like almost 2.5 years, my whole life has been run by hospitals, doctors, sort of my mum and dad telling me what to do. My support workers telling me I need to be here, this is the medication. So I was just sort of like a puppet doing what everyone else had said. And obviously I didn't have a clue where to go. I was just like a deer in headlights, didn't know what to do. And I said to her, like, I'd rather have just not come out the other end because I don't know what to do with my life. And she just splurted out the most random words. And I left and I thought that didn't even help. I don't know what to do. So I think progressively, I, I don't know how I done it, but I just sort of forced myself to believe that a safe life existed, because that's what I didn't believe. And it's actually a symptom of trauma. It's called a foreshortened future. So when you basically you don't believe that your future exists in obviously a shorter term.
Right.
So for me, I was traumatized, and I just had this sense of it was going to come back, and sort of when was it going to come back, and my scans were monthly at the time.
That's quite a lot to deal with
So
as well.
yeah,
Like every month.
but obviously I had gone from being in the hospital more or less every day, or at least 4 or 5 times a week, to having 4 weeks off. So my brain couldn't comprehend what was going on.
I guess you got a lot of time to just let the
Yeah,
thoughts.
and I had lost my job. Luckily, I was doing social media, but at the time, I sort of wasn't taking it as seriously as I could have. And I just remember thinking to myself, I'm 23 years of age. I have no job. I've no sense of direction in life. I've literally have nothing. I lost everything. What do I do? And I think when I had that thought, it was sort of like a light bulb in my head just went off. And I, th- I, I don't know. I think I thought to myself for a moment, you're only 23. You've got your entire life ahead of you at this moment. And then also I thought to myself, well, you're actually 23. You're an adult. You can sort of push yourself at least in the right direction. And I think when I combined those thoughts, I was able to like at least just pick myself up and walk, even if I had to crawl.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I just knew that I had to move forward. And I suppose I'm good at, I don't want to say forcing myself to believe, but sort of wiring my mind to believe that there is better. Better does exist. And I just had to keep telling myself. And so I have it in my phone, my notifications. It's still my thing, but I changed my locked screen and it says it will happen. So every day I looked at that and I told myself it's going to happen. You'll be fine.
What is it, if you don't mind me asking? What is for you? What is it?
For me, I just wanted to feel safe. I
That's
just
so-
wanted to experience what a truly free mind felt like, because I hadn't felt that in years. Since a teenager. I feel like I was just so caught up in life that I didn't allow myself to sort of experience what freedom really felt like, and the idea of being somebody who I needed once was all I just ever wanted to be. And I remember reading this quote, and it says, I can't think who it's by, but it says that to have had at least one person in life breathe easier because you have lived is to succeed.
Love that.
And at this time, I had like a small following on social media. And I remember going on the internet and I was just, this is going to sound so cheesy, but I Googled my name. And I remember
We've all done it, don't worry.
article that came out was, that came up on the top of the page. And I remember running downstairs and screaming to my mum, was the most read articles in the UK of 2022.
That's
and mine
amazing.
was number 8. And bearing in mind that this was the year the Queen had died, so everything had been in the news. And I remember thinking to myself, imagine how many news articles are released every single day about everything, and having the 8th most, I think it was 8th. Yeah, it was definitely in the top 10.
I think it was 8. I saw that.
8. Did you see? Yeah. It was the 8th most read article of 2022. Why am I not running with that?
Yeah.
Go somewhere with it. Take it somewhere.
That is whatever is resonating is resonating.
Exactly, and it's taken somewhere. And I think when it all happened, I mean, I was in the middle of treatment and I just posted on social media because I couldn't deal with having the conversation. I didn't know how to have the conversation.
So was it an idea? Because I've got that. That was something I've written down. Like, what made you start posting? You said you were in the hospital, surrounded by blood, not being able to move from the neck down, like the beginning of the horror movie.
The initial reason why I posted, if you go all the way to the bottom of my page, I think I deleted everything that was before that. I didn't know how to have the conversation. I created hostility around this because how do you tell like school friends? And I live in such a small town. Everybody knows everyone, so nothing is a secret for long. And I just remember thinking to myself, how on earth am I going to tell people, oh yeah, I'm fine, but I've got cancer? That is just such an awkward conversation. So I posted
a conversation, if you don't mind me saying, you'd have to have so many times.
Exactly. So I repeat myself.
Yeah.
So I just remember one evening thinking, and I still had my job at this time, so I thought I'd be fine. Like nothing's going to change. I just done it so I didn't have to go into work and explain to obviously all my colleagues and whatever else. So I just posted and said like, this is what's happened, so on. And that kind of like caught some traction. I don't really know why, but
was that Instagram or
Instagram? I posted that on, and then I sort of was then posting just sort of like updates of what was happening, so on and so forth. And then when I woke up in the hospital bed and I was just a mess, I remember being in the ward and the wall was made of glass. And I was looking outside and just watching the world go by and how like normal everybody else's life was. And I just thought to myself, how many people up and down the country are going to be in the hospital? How many young people are going to be in the same position as you, alone? So I just posted this random TikTok video, and then I posted the same thing on Instagram. And just like, I remember going on my phone the next day, and it just was like millions and thousands of people. And it just grew and grew and grew. And then I think sort of like every news outlet and press sort of outlet and sort of charity was getting in touch with me. Can you do this? Can you do that? Can you work here? Can you be an ambassador? Can you do this?
And internationally as well. I mean, I seen your link tree. It just goes all the way down.
So I think,
amazing.
Obviously, I was 21. 21, 22. That obviously just boosts your ego, doesn't it? I mean, who wouldn't at 21 or 22?
Well, with what you're going through, I think a good dopamine hit's worthwhile.
Every opportunity in my head was like out here. I just thought I was the coolest person ever. And then, just sort of all grew. And then I done a piece. Have you ever heard of Nylon magazine?
I have not.
So it's kind of big in America. And I remember them reaching out and I just thought, why do you want to work with me? And I'd done a piece with them for a magazine in New York.
Oh, wow. And
it was just like this really cool sort of thing. And I just thought, like, how am I not taking this? Like, you have the opportunity to run with this. So I'm a writer. I write everything down. That's the only way I can sort of get everything out. And I just thought, well, if I'm writing it and it's helping me, maybe it can help somebody else.
Do you think, because I think social media has good and bad, and we can talk about the bad, but let's focus on the good. And I know social media is a massive outlet for people when they're trying to find community, find their tribe.
For sure.
Did you find there was you said you're a writer, there's something really cathartic in that, isn't there?
Yeah.
Did you find catharsis and healing in that as you were going through things to help you? Maybe if you weren't outwardly dealing with things, at least you're getting them out in some way to the world and on.
Yeah, for sure. And I think as well, the sort of, it was the idea that I was maybe just helping at least one person. And I think that just pushed me to keep going. But it was sort of an outlet for me. And I felt like my friends sort of didn't really understand, which rightfully so, it's not for them to understand. My family, the only person that had ever had cancer in my family was just my nan, and she died when I was like 3. So I think on my dad's side of the family, they sort of knew how to deal with it, but I think it scared them, and I think it scared them away a little bit. And then on my mum's side, nobody had ever had cancer before, so they didn't even know how to deal with it. And no, they shouldn't know. You don't. Like, how do you know? So I think for me to get it out that was the only sort of way I could,
Mm.
and the only thing I could do.
And did you find community in it as well? Did you have a lot of people contacting you about?
100%, yeah. I think I'm such an awful person. I just find it so hard to reply to people, and I get so easily overwhelmed to this. But I think
Absolutely preaching to the choir.
the magnitude of it too. It was like thousands of people, and it'd be things like people would. Well, they still do it now. They'll send me pictures of their moles, or they'll send me a picture of a lump on their neck, and I'm not medically trained at all. I mean, I've seen my fair share with the people I've known, but I don't know the sort of right or wrong. And I think you sort of, again, it goes back to taking that responsibility on, that you sort of feel like, well, there's thousands of people that are following me and sort of want my advice. So I've got to sort of take their advice too. And you just naturally take that responsibility on, which is hard.
It is. It's a big
Really, really
responsibility
hard.
as well.
But also, I've met like the bestest friends ever who are able to understand like one of my closest friends in the whole world. We just happened to post the same video on TikTok at the same time when we both had cancer, we were both in hospital, and now we're like so close. We speak every day.
Yes.
We do loads together. So I think the time at which I was diagnosed, it was the only way you could meet other people.
Well, especially, yeah, of course.
So
lockdown feels quite far away, but it really wasn't.
No.
know.
And I think we always see things on like TikTok or Instagram, like, oh, our first lockdown was whatever, however many years ago it was. And for me, I have no recollection because it was just ruined by obviously everything that happened. But I think back sometimes, like I am really grateful to have had the opportunity to grow through something that was so awful.
And this is something you talk about a lot, finding the positives out of the trauma. So should we, please.
Yeah, for
talk
sure.
about that.
I mean, having cancer is just straight up awful. There's nothing, and people will say, oh, everything happens for a reason. It doesn't. Not everything happens for a reason. Some things are just shit.
Absolutely.
And, it doesn't happen for a reason, and life's just unfortunate, and that is just unfortunately how it goes. But I think it's important as human beings to be able to understand that even if it is awful, there's something good in it. There may not be a reason, but there is something good in everything you do. And I always push myself to find the good in everything that happens. And there's so many ways that you can look at it. Have you ever heard of the thing called a burnt toast theory?
No.
You haven't? Okay,
No.
I tell this to people all the time.
Go on then.
But it's a good way of finding a positive in something. Okay, so the theory basically goes that if you burn your toast in the morning, the time you spend making more toast or whatever it is, if you spill a cup of tea, whatever it may be, has actually stopped you from a bad thing happening.
Okay.
So I say to people, like, look, if something bad happens to you, like, I don't know what it could be. You could just have a really crap day at work and you're stuck there for a few hours after you're supposed to finish, or you're late, or whatever it may be. Maybe that happened because you were meant to be doing something else. Or, it could be anything. And I know I was supposed to have cancer. And that sounds so, so bizarre. But I was so ignorant. I was that typical teen, young person who was just blissfully unaware of the world and had no interest in learning. I sort of magically worked my way up. I was in my job for 7 years and I sort of somehow got myself into like a managerial role, which I was grateful for, but I had no sort of aspiration to move forward. I just thought I'll stay there. I was earning good money for my age, which probably now would be pennies. But I just had no interest. I failed my driving test 7 times. I just was not interested in the world. But now I'm so aware of everything. And I'm so much more appreciative of everything.
So that's an outlook that some people take decades to get there, or may never get there. And actually, having done spoken to a lot of obviously people affected by cancer. There's a real growing up real fast. What you went through, let alone the having to deal with everything on your own, let alone the fact that you had this diagnosis and you went through everything. That life perspective, that growing
100%.
up happens like that
Immediately.
And have you found that? I suppose this is where a lot of people talk about the importance of you're finding a community, being around people who get it. Your best friend that you posted the same thing, you've been through cancer at the same time, you talk every day. Has that affected you connecting with people at your age that haven't been through it? And do you feel that this has, I suppose I'm asking two questions here. The other one is that what you've been through has given you that purpose.
For sure.
Just laser focus.
For sure. I think I'll always stand on you mature through experience, not through age. And that is just the way it is. I think some people just go through really traumatic things when they're younger. And it sort of forces them to mature. And I guess sometimes I am a little bit immature in senses that, I can be a little bit stupid or a little bit, I don't think too much or whatever it may be. But it definitely has made me mature. And it is I think I act above my age for sure. But I'm grateful for that. Because I don't think I would have been anything anywhere if it wasn't for what happened to me. And I think I love being an empathetic person. I love being able to feel everything. If I'm having a really bad day, I'm so grateful that I get to feel bad. And that sounds so stupid.
But that's a gift, right?
Yeah.
You're here to
because
feel it. Yeah.
At one point, I didn't think I was ever going to feel again. So I think allowing yourself to feel everything, go right through everything, and just get to experience it all.
I really want to dive in because what you're saying now, which is beautiful, is the antithesis of how you dealt with your cancer diagnosis. You didn't allow yourself to feel. You didn't allow yourself to.
No.
I still want to find out how did you unpick that? Or has it just been a process? Has it just been? And maybe it's community, maybe it's talking to other people.
Yeah, I think
it's cumulative.
I think in a way, when you having a social media following is like having children. It's the only way I can describe it, because you feel a sense of pressure to be a role model. Like if you're a parent, you want your children to act like you do, or sort of have good manners or whatever it may be. So I think for me, I kind of kept telling myself, like, come on, you're going to be okay. You're going to be fine.
It's brilliant. It's sorry to interject, but it's almost they say in a job, fake it till you make it.
100%.
You've done that with your mental health. You've taken that responsibility of going, I have to project something that I want to see in the world. Is that fair? Do you think that's
100%? And
that's brilliant.
Another story is last year I done a TV piece for Stand Up to Cancer, and I filmed it in the October time. And I remember sitting in the studio, and now I think back and I just think to myself, I pushed myself through again there. But this lady was doing, obviously when you go on TV, you have to have your makeup done. So I was sitting there in the chair and I was just thinking, I don't want to do this. I really, really don't want to do it. And I went on to set and they were telling me, right, you need to do this, you need to do that, and this is what you need to say. And I just done it over and over and over all day long. I was just like clockwork. And then a car picked me up at the end of the day. And I remember looking at the window in the car and just thinking to myself, nobody in that room had any idea how much you didn't want to do that. And when I just thought to myself, why didn't you say, just stop? And I think when I was in the car on the way home, it was sort of a realization that sometimes I'm my own problem. I'm my biggest enemy, and I stop myself from saying things, or I stop myself from feeling things because I'm too scared of it sort of reversing itself back onto me, if that sort of makes any sense. And I think when you're put in a position where your life is at risk, you're just frightened of everything. There isn't anything on this earth that you're not frightened of. And a funny thing, do you know Shell Rowe? Yeah. She put on her Instagram story the other day that this morning, or maybe the other day, I can't remember, but she put on a story that she had a letter sent to the house, and she was too afraid to touch the letter because she had scared that somebody licked her in the middle of COVID. And she was so afraid that if she touched that, she would get COVID and get taken out by COVID after she had survived cancer.
Gee.
And I was thinking to myself, like, yeah, you are petrified of everything. So I think you naturally just put this bubble around yourself to protect yourself, but you don't let it down. It's constantly there, no matter what. It's always, and I think I'll go the rest of my life without being there. But I think I had to let myself know that it was okay. That it was okay to let it down. It was okay to let people know that you're not up for doing something, or let people know that you're feeling that way. And I think that's what pushed me through. Was not all the time, because it's physically impossible for a human being to be that way 24/7. But just every so often, let yourself know that it's okay. And I think that just really pushes you through.
That sort of that trauma bubble feels like a similar analogy to like a grief bubble. They're probably very similar. Like it doesn't go.
No,
it ebbs and it flows and it wanes, but it's always there. So like you're just navigating life with a giant trauma bubble, I suppose.
100%. 100%.
Which when you're done with cancer, you're done. Off you go.
Exactly.
And you're like, oh well, I'm in a zorb of trauma.
You don't know where to go. Yeah. And I think sometimes as well as I'm scared of people based in that bubble, because I don't want people to ever tell me how I feel or how I'm supposed to cope with it. Because for so much of my life, I was told, you need to do this, you need to take these, you need to be here, you need to do whatever it is. So now I'm like, well, actually, no, I'm going to do what I can to make sure that I'm okay. But I think, again, sometimes it goes back to let it go down. Let it burst. Let yourself be free if you can, and if you're able to.
Do you have, I don't know what the right words is, triggers for like when you know everything's getting a bit too much? Are you getting better at recognizing when, okay, I need to step back from this? Or
now I am. Well, I say now I am, and then I've just like worked like a dog for the last couple of months.
And we've got you all the way down here for this podcast.
No. But I think I do. I'll only say yes to things that I want to do. I mean, I get asked to do loads of different things, and some of the things I'm just not comfortable with doing. Like I mentioned to you earlier on, that crowds are just not for me.
Yes.
And I feel I was asked to do the Race for Life, to start the Race for Life, and I just can't be in front of a crowd. And the thought of standing in front of people that are about to run, and like give them a sob story and like why they should run, and which is great, but I'm just not the person to do that.
That's really interesting. I've never really thought about the control that social media actually allows you over your vulnerability, because there is, being on stage or being in front of a Race for Life, incredibly open.
Yeah,
people can physically touch you. They can come up and grab you afterwards. They can hug you if you don't know. That's a very exposing place to be. Whereas actually, social media allows you to control that, right?
You're hidden, and people will say to me all the time,
still like, authentic, but it's
100%. It's still me. And people will say, but 15 million people watched a video of yours on TikTok. But I don't think about that number. It's there for everybody to see, and 50 million people have watched a video, or 9 million people have watched a video, and sort of 200 people have commented on that photo, or whatever it may be. But I can switch that off. Whereas if I don't want to switch it off, and I'm in a position where I can't, that for me is like a trigger, and I'm like, no.
You feel unsafe in that.
I feel and that's my biggest fear, is ever feeling unsafe again. because I've worked so hard to feel safe.
And you absolutely deserve the right to control when you feel safe. Wow, that's it's just a lot to take in. I don't know how it is saying it. It's absolutely fascinating. Yeah. Do you want to talk about any charities or organisations that have? I know you've. They're all after you, but you know we say this platform is for absolutely everyone. So if there's anyone that helped you during, or anyone that has really resonated,
there is something I would like to mention. I know how difficult it can be. I said when I mentioned earlier on, when you're diagnosed from 24 down, you're still classed as a child. And I would have, I'm 25 now, I'm 25 in May. So I would have switched to sort of adult support. Yeah. And I know how many people do struggle with that support. And there is a charity called Trek Stock.
Love Trek Stock.
Which offer that support and that sort of guidance in that transition stage between obviously being diagnosed as a young person and transitioning to sort of adult life. And I think it's really important to just reach out if you're struggling.
Absolutely.
And the support there is from them.
And they do a lot online as well. It's not it's not geographically located. It's just...
And I think their support is so vast.
Yeah.
They'll do talks, they do exercise classes, they do everything. Everything is sort of covered.
Yes, I had yoga in my head there when you were talking. No, they do.
I just think it's really important. Yeah. I think it's not spoken about enough, and I think more people need to be aware that the transition between young person and adult is really difficult, but support does exist and it is there.
Incredible. Thank you. I feel like I could talk all day. I've got so many. Where are you now in your journey, for want of a better word? How are things with you?
Good. Really, really, really good. My scans have just changed to 6 monthly.
Feeling good about that?
Yes, I think. It was a little bit of a change. So it was monthly, 3 monthly, and now it's 6 monthly. I don't think I ever sort of get used to it. But we sort of I keep reminding myself that I've done the worst, and it sort of can only get better. Hopefully, touch wood, it can only get better from here.
Do they build up? Do you find them building up to the scanxiety that everyone talks
for sure?
about?
And I don't think I'll ever get used to handling that. I think every time I'll just be a bag of nerves, no matter where I am, what I'm doing, how busy I am, where I am. I know I've got one coming up after I think it's next month, and I just know as soon as the month hits that it'll sort of loom. But I think naturally now I'm aware.
Yes.
So I know what calms me down. I know what to do when, I get bad.
Yeah.
So you just sort of soldier on, you plow through, you just get used to it as much as horrible as it is. But
being that self-aware helps, doesn't it? Being able to 100%. Understand how you're feeling,
and it's
feeling.
Learning how to calm yourself down too. I think that's really important because I had no idea.
Is there any tips and tricks you want to share?
Yeah, well, I've done therapy, and I think that is just the best thing I ever done. And I don't think enough people know about it either.
Especially men. I think we are terrible.
Really, and I don't think you push yourself enough, do you, to go to therapy? I know I didn't.
My now wife had to literally say, go or I'm leaving you. And I was like, hey, okay. That's
Run into that. Yeah. No, but I think go to therapy, speak to someone, speak to anybody. Like anyone, pull somebody on the street if you've got to.
There's something about the third part. They're not. Do you know what I mean? I found it was my safe space. That was what I felt. It was. They weren't emotionally attached. They didn't need to offer advice, and they were just removed enough that I felt like I can unload.
And as somebody that doesn't know, and I think, in the world of cancer and in the world of any sort of bad situation, I think people have tendencies to compare, and that's where you just get triggered because it's sort of, it becomes a competition, and that isn't sort of a helpful situation. It just makes you actually worse.
Yes.
So I go to somebody who isn't aware of your situation. Obviously, they may know who you are, but isn't aware of the extent of the situation. And even things like, I remember my therapist telling me to lay on my bed and count to 3, but close my eyes. And she just used to say, watch a laser and go down your room and just breathe in and out every time. And I just remember looking at her and thinking to myself, that is the stupidest thing you could ever tell me to do. I'm not laying and imagining a laser. And then I remember this one day I was really, really stressed out. I was so panicked. And I thought, just do it, Jack. Get it done.
Just fuck it.
So I laid
the
on the
laser thing.
bed like an idiot. And I closed my eyes and counted whatever it was to 10. And I just watched the laser. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm fine. Why wouldn't you just do that before? Listen to what people have to say.
We are very hard-headed as a generally.
I hate people telling me what to do. So if somebody tells me to do something, I'm like,
even if you're paying them for that.
You're not telling me to do that. Also, I think it's really important to understand that for a lot of cancer survivors, there is funded therapy. So, and I know, obviously, financial cost of cancer is a lot.
Yes.
So just ask. The best thing you can do is ask, you know, and if it can be funded, even if it's just partly funded, just go for it and see what you can get. And
I think definitely try, right? It's 100%. Not necessarily for everyone, but
it's not, no,
it's
not going to be. Don't, I always say to people, never go in with the expectation that you're going to be absolutely golden by the time you leave, because that doesn't work. It took me months to be able to say I'm grateful for your time, but I don't need you anymore. It took ages, and even now I think to myself, maybe should I have stayed a little bit longer? But I can go back.
Go back, exactly.
There's no sort of holding you back, but there is support out there, and you can get help. I think that's really important to bear in mind.
Absolutely. And I think I was having a conversation just this week with another charity that said they're starting to classify peer-to-peer support as a type of therapy, which I thought is such an interesting thing, to the framing of that, because there is a massive element of finding people
100%
that have been through it, talking to them and just sharing. And I think, I was just saying, I think there's potentially less comparisons. I think that's a big thing people are worried about.
Sure.
Oh, my cancer's not as bad as your cancer. But actually, as we were talking about earlier, the great qualifier of cancer is it's all shit.
It is all shit. And I try and break this barrier down so much, and no matter how much you do it, somebody's always got something to say about it. But it doesn't matter if you're diagnosed stage 1, stage 4, whatever it is, whatever cancer it is, could be anything. I know people that have been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer and have only had to have surgery. I know people that are incurable and having treatment for the rest of their lives. I know somebody that was diagnosed with stage 1 melanoma, had it cut out. Thankfully, they were fine. Cancer is cancer. And no matter how deep or stage, whatever it affects everybody differently. And it is, some people will be absolutely fine, not bothered about it in the slightest. And then some people will just fall to pieces at the words of it. It is frightening. It's so frightening. So being aware of that is so, so, so important.
Yeah.
And we don't want to hear that your friend's nan has passed away, or
the classic,
your cousin's dog had cancer. That is so irrelevant. I cannot stress to you enough how much we don't want to hear those words. Keep it to yourself.
100%. And there is no right or wrong way to deal with the cancers as well.
Exactly.
Regardless of staging, diagnosis, prognosis, if it's, if you're really struggling with it, you're really struggling with it.
Yeah, for sure. There's no right or wrong to anything in life.
No, not at all.
You just do whatever you've got to do to push yourself through.
Absolutely.
No rule book. Just go forward. As long, crawl, climb, anything. Just move forward.
I love that idea of it's forward motion, isn't it? In any capacity.
Form. It doesn't matter how you're doing it. Just keep moving forward. I cannot stress how important it is. And safer exists. Always.
Before we end, I've got 5 quick questions, but I'm going to add an extra one, which is, as you sit here today, not necessarily in this podcast studio, do you feel safe?
Yes. Right now, yeah, I feel safe. But there are days where I question, when is it going to come back? Or if it's going to come back. And that is just a natural human way for the mind to function. But right now, I've reached a point where I'm able to feel comfortable, for sure.
I think it's a hell of an achievement after everything. Do you feel proud of that? Do you feel that internally? Like, do you reflect and go, wow, I'm taking stock of this?
I think sometimes when I look back and think how much of an ignorant 21-year-old boy I was, I'm really proud of how much I've grown. I'm really proud of what I've achieved. But I think a part of me will always resent how I handled what I went through, because I damaged myself way much more than I needed to be. And I'm now learning to sort of untangle the sort of mess that I created just for the sake of trying to be what I'm not. But I'm going to get there. I know I'm going to get there. I believe that I will get there.
Absolutely. I think I really resonate with that, because when my brother was dying, I was an absolute knobhead. And I hold a lot of guilt about that.
Yeah.
What positions I put myself in and how it affected people around me. And one of my friends just looked at me once and went, "You did the best you could. All of us were absolute twats. And we should be embarrassed of who we were once upon a time." And I guess that is a sort of analogy for life,
it
especially.
is for sure. And
I took some solace in it anyway.
People all the time. You can resent how you reacted and how you dealt with a situation, but you did the best with what you knew.
And you learn from it.
And
I think growth is what you should be measuring yourself.
Sure, as long as you're able to look at a situation and acknowledge and own, yeah, I was an idiot and I did act like a bit of a twat when I did that. And maybe I shouldn't have done that. But I can acknowledge that I did maybe something wrong or handled it, incorrectly. And if you can acknowledge that and learn from it, then you've succeeded.
Absolutely. And then if you can amplify that in the way that you were doing,
for sure,
with the responsibility that you take to reach millions of people, then you are doing and putting something amazing out into the world. So you should be incredibly proud of the slightly older young man that you still are. Are you all right if I ask 5 quick-fire questions?
Yeah, for sure. Go ahead.
Brilliant. So, off the cuff. Number 1, what advice would you give to someone who's worried they might have cancer?
Go to the doctors. Fear nothing. There's no embarrassment. Just go. I would recommend going on to a charity's page, first of all, and checking symptoms. And if you believe what you feel matches that, go to the doctor immediately. Don't hesitate, go. Drop everything, nothing comes before it. Go. And again, there's no embarrassment, fear nothing. 99.9% of the time, it's just going to be nothing. But there is always going to be a 1% chance that it could be something. And know that you will be okay. Even if it means, I don't know, a year of hell. I once had 12 months to live, and now I'm 25 with my whole life ahead of me. It physically cannot rain forever. Just go.
He's pissing it down at the moment. So.
It's rained all day.
And I would, just to add to that, from a charity's perspective, if you're on our pages, any of us, and you need a slight nudge, just contact us, because we are always the ones that will nudge you to the doctors.
For sure,
Sometimes you just need a bit
And, you know, people say to me all the time, how did you know? I literally just went on, I can't even remember who it was, just went on an Instagram page, looked, and I thought, yeah, that is what is wrong with me.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it turned out to be obviously stage 3 cancer, but just message, do whatever you got to do, message it. And there's so many people these days that you can speak to if you're nervous about going. And ask, if you want somebody to go with you, ask somebody to go with you. There's no shame in asking anybody to go with you either.
Absolutely. Take a chaperone and ask for a second opinion if you're not too happy. So.
Absolutely, 100% big on that.
Brilliant advice. Number 2, what was the most impactful thing someone did for you after your diagnosis?
Oh gosh, there's so many things I could say. My friends and my family, when I lost, so I was wrongfully dismissed, which is a whole other story of my job. I lost my job, and they climbed a mountain for me and raised money so that I was just able to afford to keep my head above water, which obviously I'm incredibly thankful for. But I think that really showed me that kindness exists, even though they're my friends and my family. I know that they carry the most kindness in the world, but I think when I was unable to see how many people were willing to rally around and help was just, for me, a sort of a solid piece of evidence that humanity still exists, even when I felt like it didn't exist.
What a beautiful lifeline to have during that. That's shout out friends and family.
For sure.
Number 3, slightly different. What was the worst thing someone has said to you about having cancer? I'm guessing it might be about a dead dog.
Worst thing someone has said to me. Oh, I've got a story.
Everyone thinks for a second. There's always one that sticks out.
I mentioned earlier on that I was in a cancer ward with everybody who was seconds away from death. It was the worst thing ever. It was like God's waiting room. And I remember sitting once. My cancer centre was at the top of my hospital. It was just sort of a little building, and my oncologist, he walked in and went up the corridor at the back, and he was off this one day. So I sat just a row of chairs outside, and my appointment time passed, 45 minutes passed, an hour passed. So I knocked on the door and I said, I'm really sorry. I said, my appointment is well overdue. And she looked me dead in the eyes and said, oh, I'm really sorry. I thought you were just waiting for your grandparents.
Excellent.
I was like, nope.
Wow.
It's me.
Way to feel really valued, really looked after.
I had my blood test and just cried for about 3 days. And I was like, Mum, how can this be happening to me? And she was like, Jack, just ignore it. But that is probably, is what somebody said to me, which hurt me the most, I think, because I just thought to myself, great.
Yeah.
This is what they think of me in this ward. And I had to keep going back to that ward, knowing that my nurses were the best people on earth. I still speak to them now. I love them all to pieces. But for a short time, that's what I believed was being said about me. And I just hated everyone.
That's not what you want to feel. Number 4, what advice would you give to someone recently diagnosed with cancer?
So much. Feel it all. Go right through it. Feel every single thing. It's okay to be sad. You can lay in bed for as long as you want to lay in bed. Cry. Laugh. Do whatever you got to do. Just make sure you feel everything and acknowledge that you're feeling everything. If whatever it is, you're allowed to feel that way. You can make a joke. You can make a really dark joke if you want to make a really
lot of those
dark
in the
joke.
cancer community, isn't there?
You can cry your heart. Do whatever you've got to do to make yourself feel comfortable, and know that it doesn't stay that way forever. I think that is what I would have loved to have somebody to have told me, that it will not feel like that forever. And to know also that the hospital will always prepare you for the worst. And because I think that is what really caught me off guard, is that the things I was told ruined me. So you're not alone in anything you feel, but also everything you feel is valid. Always. It's never, ever, no matter what anybody says to you, what anybody says you should feel, how you should act, is wrong. You're going through it. You feel how you want to feel.
Excellent. I think that's, well, obviously is fantastic advice. Lastly, number 5, what's the biggest lesson you've learned from having cancer?
Gosh. Impossible is an option.
Oh, that was so catchy. Go on, give us a bit more.
I think, again, you're so channeled into survival and fight or flight that I believed that once the only way this was going to go was that I was going to die in that hospital. I was never going to leave that hospital. And I think because so much was failing, I believed that it was going to be impossible to ever beat cancer. But when I sort of kept pushing myself through and kept turning up for myself, I kept going, I sort of thought, no, why am I going to cower down to what somebody has to say? Also, I don't mean cower down. I know a doctor is qualified and has every right to tell you what is going on. But I mean, don't believe it's over before it's over. You can. You always can. You can't doesn't exist. You can always, always, always can. And impossible is just one option. There's millions of options in between. And you have a million options to choose from over impossible. So don't settle for less than more than impossible.
Brilliant. What a place to end another fantastic episode. Thank you so much for being here. Honestly, as with all our guests, could just chat all day, but
no,
I feel like my brain's been
having me.
It's been
really appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure.
Super fun too.
Shall we just end where people can find you in case they haven't? Yeah, you'll be tagged on all our stuff.
My Instagram is who.is Jack with 2 Ks instead of CK. And then my TikTok is exactly the same, but with 3 Ks. So who is Jack?
Brilliant.
Across all platforms.
I'm sure many of our listeners will have come across you anyway. But thank you again. Thank you for coming down. Thank you for everything you're doing. And yeah, we will keep in touch and keep inspiring us. Thank you for listening, and thank you to our amazing supporters and funders who make this podcast happen. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a review and follow us on social media at Thrive Against Cancer. And be sure to check out our other episodes wherever you listen to your podcasts and on YouTube. If you want to help support our mission to give a voice to the cancer community, please contact us or visit our website to learn more at thriveagainstcancer.co.uk.